Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving into a genuinely fascinating cultural analysis. We're going to unpack the underlying sociological frameworks behind how we talk about our most private moments. Have you ever noticed that the way we discuss intimacy changes drastically depending on the language we're speaking? It's not just a matter of swapping out vocabulary. It's literally a window into the very soul of a culture.
Think about it. The words you use behind closed doors. Why do some cultures speak in flowers while others go straight for raw instincts? Today, we're going to uncover the deep-seated reasons why one society might use beautiful poetry to describe intimacy, while another prefers raw, biological reality.
Here's our roadmap for today. We'll look at the language of intimacy, the 3 rules of expression, the cultural language spectrum, map out some global languages, debunk the big East-West myth, and get to the final word.
Section 1. The language of intimacy, flora versus fauna. Let's get right into how language handles the sensitive stuff. We like to think of this as the plants against the animals.
Okay, almost every language on Earth runs on 2 parallel tracks when it comes to taboo topics. On one side, you've got the euphemism system. This is basically designed to soften the blow. On the other side, there's the dysphemism, or direct system. This one's all about emphasizing impact and highlighting raw reality. Now, every culture has both, right? But the real game changer, the thing that actually defines a culture's public face, is which of these 2 systems becomes the socially acceptable mainstream.
Section 2. 3 rules of expression. What shapes our words? So what actually decides if a culture goes for poetic euphemisms or explicit dysphemisms? It certainly doesn't happen by accident.
It's a cascading effect, and it happens in 3 distinct steps. Step 1. Social norms. Does the society value strict order and etiquette, or do they champion individualism? That feeds right into Step 2, the perception of intimacy. If strict etiquette rules the day, intimacy is usually seen through the lens of life, growth, and beauty. But if it's more individualistic, it's viewed as raw desire. And finally, Step 3, the language strategy. That perception directly dictates whether they reach for a euphemism or just say it directly.
Section 3, the cultural language spectrum. The 4-part framework. Let's see how these rules build out a grand spectrum of human expression.
What's incredibly cool here is that we can categorize practically any language into one of 4 distinct buckets. First up, the metaphorical type. Think flowers, fruits, and seasons. The logic, avoid the taboo completely but make it sound beautiful. Next, the aesthetic type. They use direct words, sure, but they keep it soft and romantic. No avoidance, just pretty. Then we have the mixed type. This one shifts wildly between super elegant and straight-up vulgar, completely depending on the context. And lastly, the instinctual type. This leans hard on body parts and physical behaviors. It is all about reality and directness.
Section 4, Mapping Global Languages, a Linguistic World Tour. So, what does this actually look like in practice? Let's take this framework and apply it to 6 major language families for a quick linguistic world tour.
Starting with Chinese from the Sino-Tibetan family. This is a powerfully metaphorical culture, heavily shaped by traditional Confucian etiquette. Notice how intimacy is beautifully disguised as nature. You'll hear phrases like clouds and rain or blossoming. Intimacy is essentially de-animalized here. It's tied to growth, seasons, and aesthetic beauty. Now, do rough, vulgar words exist? Absolutely, but they are strictly shoved down to low-tier speech, far away from polite public discourse.
Moving over to Japanese, we find a really fascinating mixed approach. On the one hand, Japanese literature is famously metaphorical, lots of cherry blossoms and seasonal shifts. But in reality and within adult culture, the language flips to highly direct, instinctual words. Japanese features an incredibly rigid boundary between poetic public language and highly direct private terminology.
Then we have English, the classic mixed type. It perfectly balances emotional romanticism with raw, animalistic instinct. But it entirely depends on the context. You've got your polite euphemisms like make love or sleep with, but then direct phrases lean super heavily into animal instinct and heat. There is a massive, massive gap in English between elegant linguistic registers and crude ones, and honestly, we navigate that gap every single day.
Now consider French. French takes the aesthetic direct route. They really don't shy away from the topic. There's no massive culture of taboo avoidance here, but they make absolutely sure the vocabulary stays elegant. They speak about it directly, heavily emphasizing love, desire, and the beauty of the human body, but they consciously avoid the rough, raw, animalistic phrasing you'd easily find in English.
Contrast that with German, an instinctual, direct-leaning language. German tends to be way more functional and descriptive.
It basically strips away all that romantic buffering we saw in French or English and swaps it for descriptive reality. The terminology closely and accurately describes actual physical behaviors and organs without any real need to dress it up in metaphors.
Finally, let's look at Arabic. This is a strong metaphorical combined with a strong taboo type. Because of Islamic norms, there is massive public avoidance of these topics. But what's truly incredible is how this public restriction actually fuels the art. Arabic literature relies heavily on lush, elaborate metaphors of gardens, perfumes, and ripe fruits to convey intimacy. It really proves that the stronger the public taboo, the richer and more elaborate those poetic metaphors become behind closed doors.
Section 5. Debunking the East-West myth, the two true cultural axes. Now, it's super easy to assume this all just boils down to Eastern cultures are conservative and Western cultures are open, right?
Well, that is a massive misconception we need to debunk right now. Here is the absolute truth. Every single culture, without exception, possesses both poetic words and raw biological words. The real difference isn't about what words actually exist in their dictionaries, it's entirely about what is deemed decent, acceptable, and mainstream in public discourse. So instead of that lazy East versus West divide, we really should be looking at these two true sociological axes to understand how a society functions. Axis 1 is orientation. Is the culture social-driven, needing language to be implicit and fruit-like to keep group harmony? Or is it individual-driven, allowing language to be direct and animal-like? Then there's Axis 2, the goal. Is the culture aesthetic-driven, relying on metaphors to beautify reality? Or is it functional-driven, prioritizing direct, accurate descriptions? This matrix right here, this is the true decoder ring for cultural expression.
Section 6. The final word. What our words say about us. Which brings us to a pretty profound realization about human nature and how we navigate the most private parts of our existence in the public square.
It all boils down to this brilliant sociological observation. Fruit-like expression socializes and aestheticizes sex. Animal-like expression naturalizes and instinctualizes it. Basically, every culture on Earth simply chooses a different balance point. Do they socialize intimacy through beautiful metaphors or naturalize it through raw instinct? Neither is objectively right or wrong, they're literally just different tools for human connection.
As we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with this to ponder. Think about the words you default to in your own life. Are you reaching for the flowers, or are you relying on instinct? Where does your own personal vocabulary fall on this incredible cultural spectrum? Keep questioning the words you use every day, and thanks so much for joining me on this deep dive.